If it's something on your bucket list.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, the 19th of November,
He has, but he has yet to find it.
2018, Anno Domini. We're here at 7 o'clock. Let's go to work. And join me in a flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm sorry about that. That's not good at all.
A bunch of 7th and 8th graders up at Sublimity wrote essays about the flag for a VFW project, the veterans group. And Mrs. Nolan up there turned in, used a kind of a class project, but they turned in 38 of these. One that tickled me the most, I guess, was a little 7th grader, no names here. She thought the flag was important to protect the rights of women, which is kind of a neat way to go on it, and said it was going to prevent her from being sold alongside the road to some old guy. I got so tickled.
In their future.
I got so tickled at that. I just had to share it with you tonight. Let's see. Everyone's here that needs to be. Good evening, all. Let's see. There are no additions to the agenda. No. Are there any declarations of ex-party contact, conflict of interest,
Mr.
bias?
Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, in regards to the public hearing regarding the Village Creek subdivision, I have driven down there and around that block, but shouldn't have any influence on my decision.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Before we get started with comments from the public, prerogatives of the chair, I'm going to ask Alyssa to come over and give her a plaque and share with you something she's accomplished. And this is from the Women's Leadership Academy. On this day, November 9th, 2018, Alyssa Angelo, if I can read this and look, successfully completed the Northwest Women's Leadership Academy as a member of the first and founding cohort of the Academy. This esteemed professional woman gained valuable local government leadership skills and a professional network she can access for the remainder of her career. And self-improvement, a thing we need to encourage, and when it happens, enjoy it. So thank you very much, and congratulations. All right, here we go. Presentations, comments from the public. Ms. Mahoney. Judy?
Would you have Steve go first, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Steve, croissant.
My name is Steve Poison. I live at 1750 East Pine Street. I'm with Revitalized Downtown Stayton, and I'm here with Yi Wu, who is the owner of Mick and Mom's on 3rd Avenue in Stayton. We were here 2 weeks ago during the public hearing about the ordinances and requested that you take action on his special circumstance given the smoking issue on 3rd Avenue. It is our wish that regardless of what the public committee that you're about to appoint today decides about the ordinance as a whole, Mr. Wu and I still do not believe it's appropriate for people to be smoking in front of his particular business. And one solution to that would be for the council to come up with a way to let his customers, as well as other employees in that block, as well as the public, use one of the parking spaces behind his building in the municipal lot. Because it is public space and The current ordinance says that there's no smoking on public property. It would require some sort of lease back to him or exception in the ordinance or something, some action on your part. So, in fact, it may help the committee that's looking at the smoking ordinance as a whole if his issue is removed from the issue at hand. They may be more free to look at the possibility of passing or not passing an overall smoking ordinance for downtown if his business is not put in this unusual circumstance because his business is unique compared to other businesses in the downtown area. So I ask on behalf of Mr. Wu that you take some action on our request. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve. And Mr. Wu? And we are going to, I am, later on this evening, appoint that committee to, at some point in the near future, start to study that in a fairly comprehensive manner. I hope, and we all do. Okay, thank you. Judy? Ms. Mahoney?
Thank you. Judy Money, 2110 East Pine Street. And I first want to just congratulate all the new counselors and also thank Priscilla for all her hard work. She's been really great spokesperson for the city and the community. And I used to be, we called it back in my hometown, I was a district commissioner. We didn't have city council. I was on there, I was there for 2 terms and another term right before I got married. So I understand city government and how it's run. I've been on many different committees, the airport board, all different kinds of things. And so I want to be involved in this community. We moved here. And that's one of the reasons that I chose and my husband to be on the RDS, to help, not dictate, to help our downtown. And we weren't here for the last city council meeting, and I'd just like to say, and it's in the past, but I need to say this about integrity, honesty. And I met with Keith when I first got on RDS, and we had some very good conversations. He directed me and our committee to go through the channels of the city. We worked with Dan, we've worked with Lance, we've worked with Keith, we've worked with city employees with our parklet. We want it to be positive. I was disappointed in the report that was done. I don't think it was quite accurate. It's in the past, and I think now we can work together as a community very positively, and I appreciate Brian checking into all of the laws on smoking. I listened to the video today, and I appreciate that. And I just want to say we've come up with a good solution with Mr. Wu, and I'm hoping the city will look at this and make it happen. Do you want me to stop? It's a positive thing, and it's a win-win, and he's looking that direction too. So please really look at that and consider it. And I look forward to continuing being RDS. We're all volunteers. We're not paid. I moved here from Portland, and we just want our downtown to be good for families and everybody to come to, and we want to help the business people there. And we have different grants, we have different programs to be able to help people, and that's what we are. We want to help, not create problems. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Judy. Anyone else on presentation comments? We'll come back to that toward the end of the meeting. If not, we'll go to the consent agenda.
Mayor,
Yes.
I move we accept the consent agenda as written in the minutes.
Okay. Approved as presented. Would that be all right?
I'll second.
Okay, a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as written. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. Now to the meat and potatoes. We have a public hearing. Condition of approval U regarding parking restrictions in the Village Creek subdivision, and I have a script to read. Many of you probably have this memorized, having heard me read it innumerable times, but one more time. Good evening, my name is Hank Porter. As mayor, I'll be presiding over this meeting. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of land use file 20-10/18. This case was initiated by the City Council to consider whether to modify a condition of approval placed on the original application for subdivision in 2001. The condition of approval requires that on-street parking be permitted only on one side of the street for streets within the Village Creek subdivision. The hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires a statement be made to those in attendance that covers certain matters relative to this case. That statement, with all the information required to be presented under the Oregon Revised Statutes number 197.763 bracket 5, is printed and available at the back counter. If you have not yet received one of these forms, you should go get one and review it prior to presenting your testimony. If anyone has any questions regarding anything on the statement or objects to it not being read out loud, please raise those questions when it comes to your turn to speak during the hearing. Also at the back counter is the agenda for this evening's meetings, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak during public hearings, the City Council's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You're encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I'd ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was sent in this case. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case. I hear none. If there are any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any member of this body. I hear none. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record. As a participant in the hearing, the city is required to notify you of the final results of the process. We are now ready for the staff introduction. Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. The issue before you this evening is a public hearing on whether to modify condition of approval U from the 2001 approval of the Village Creek subdivision. This is a unusual case to appear before you in. One, typically you are dealing with legislative public hearings, land use public hearings, and this is a quasi-judicial public hearing, which means that your role is not making policy, but looking at the information and the facts that are presented to you and judging whether the criteria for approval are satisfied or not. Secondly, it is unusual in that usually in a quasi-judicial application, there is an applicant who is appearing before you with a proposal. And in this case, there is neither an applicant nor is there really a proposal. The issue of the parking restriction in the Village Creek subdivision was brought to your attention back in October, and you decided to schedule this public hearing tonight. So essentially, this is here on your initiative, which makes it a little unusual. And because there is no proposal, the agenda has not set out the opportunity for proponents or opponents to testify, because there is no proposal to be in favor or against. So with that, the Village Creek subdivision was originally intended to be a mobile home park back in 1998, 1999. The original approval for the Santiam Station development, what is now Village Creek subdivision was Lot 12 of the original Santiam Station subdivision. The streets were constructed with 28 foot of pavement between sloped curbs, and then the developer either changed his mind or market conditions changed or whatever, but in 2001, after the streets were developed, the applicant came back before the city council and requested permission to create the subdivision. At that time, again, the streets were already built with paved, the curbs installed, the water lines, sewer lines, etc., installed. And the city council, when they were considering the application to create the subdivision, noted that the width of the streets was less than the standard subdivision width. Again, they're 28 feet wide, curb to curb. The city's standard street width is 34 feet in a 60-foot right-of-way. But the city council in 2001 approved the subdivision with a long list of conditions of approval, one of which was condition U, which required that 5-foot property line sidewalks be installed on both sides of the streets, with a 3-foot parkway was the language the council used, a 3-foot wide landscape strip, and that parking be permitted on one side only. Shortly after that, the plat was recorded, creating the, I believe it's 68 lots in the subdivision, and dedicating the streets to the city. And in October, I believe it was, October of 2001, or November, the developer returned to the city council and requested that the city council consider a modification to 2 of the conditions of approval, one of which was condition U, and the request was that instead of building property line sidewalks with a landscape strip between the sidewalk and the curb, that the sidewalks be curb line sidewalks immediately adjacent to the curb. And that was approved by the city council in, I believe, November of 2001, but still the condition of approval read that parking be permitted on one side of the street only. Evidently, the city did not require the developer to post no parking signs on one side of the street, and the city did not choose to do so either back in 2001. Probably with changes in staff along the way, no one gave it a second thought as to whether there were parking restrictions in the subdivision or not. In 2014, the city began to receive complaints of congested parking on Hobson Street, and at that time, staff discovered these conditions of approval, and the decision was made for the city to post no parking signs. For reasons that I'm not aware of, the Public Works Department and the Police Department made a determination to post signs only on Hobson Street and Greer Drive at that time. I think it was because Hobson Street was the street experiencing the parking issues. It was in this fall or late summer that I guess issues again began to arise, and folks came to the city council to request that parking be permitted on both sides of the street. You've got in your packet a printout of an email from the Stayton Fire District. Earlier this month, the fire district took their ladder truck and a couple of vehicles up to Hobson Street, parked them. You've got one photo here, a close-up detail of showing once the outriggers on the ladder truck are extended, how close it is to a parked vehicle, and the other,
Dan, I'm going to hit the lights.
Oh,
just
okay, go for it.
contrast If you want to go back.
Go for it.
Hit the lights.
yep,
Oh, I did.
good job. We'll keep you in office for another couple of years. So again, so this is the north side of the street. Now I can't see if I got hitting the right button or not. Here we go. The full view and the left side of the street. So the, again, in your packet, the recommendation from the fire chief is that the restriction on parking on one side of the street be retained. Also in your packet is a memo from the police chief who makes a similar recommendation. So the recommendation from staff is to leave condition U, to retain it unchanged and continue to allow parking on only one side of the street.
Is that it for?
That is it for the slideshow.
Holy crap.
So if council's got any questions, I will answer them best that I can.
Okay, our next item then is questions from the council.
Dan, first of all, I agree with the fire chief and police, but out of courtesy, were the residents of the area notified that the ordinance had been rediscovered and would be enforced?
My recollection is that in 2014, when the signs were put up on Hobson and Greer, that letters were sent out. But that's 4 years ago, and I don't know if we kept records of that or not. Notice of tonight's public hearing was mailed to the owner of record of all of the lots in the subdivision, as well as the usual owners of property within 300 feet. That is our standard practice.
Thank you.
Counselor?
He answered my question.
Oh, okay, okay. Other questions from the council? Okay. Let's go to public testimony. We'll get this stirred up a little bit. Name and address, please.
Aaron Fuson, 750 Hobson.
Okay, go ahead.
So I've experienced a chimney fire at my place back way before the signs. Fire sublimity showed up first. We had no problems. You're not going to find that there's cars parked just like what you're showing here all the time. I mean, this is very, very, very worst case scenario. And 90% of the time, people are parking in their driveways or whatever. We lost half of our parking when you guys decided to put these signs up for whatever reason. And no, sir, we did not get notice. They just got put up.
That was, Aaron, that was the notice 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
For those. So they just got put up.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm pretty, I think we can come to some better compromise. Let's do a 2-hour parking or something, I got to have access to be able to move stuff in and out of my house or whatever it may be, I mean, it's a good option for all of us.
Okay. So let's
I started a petition down there saying we don't want these signs. I believe you have them, and the pictures of other cars parked there for multiple days.
Yeah.
And I end up with a parking ticket for a 20-minute park job, I'm a little disgusted, I guess, by it. So
you're going to submit a proposal for, say, a 2-hour parking limit?
I can, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Mayor, is there a petition?
What's that?
Do we have a petition?
I don't know.
I did not fill one out. I've been busy. I haven't been able to do it. So
Okay.
I can if you want me to. I thought it was just come down here and voice what we needed to voice, but apparently there's more hoops to jump through.
Well, there's a public safety issue, and with our fire services.
Well, I get that.
With that, both of them weighing in on it, yeah. Anyway, anything else right now?
The 12 years that I lived there before that, the city put my family in jeopardy then, is what I'm hearing, basically, you know, with the knowing about the no parking on one side of the street and just allowing it to happen without it. And then just all of a sudden, one day, just go ahead and putting it up is, it's not cool.
Okay.
As a homeowner, I'm angry with the city right now because of that.
Well,
So, we just gotta do what we gotta do. I mean, these guys, we got people parking in front of a fire hydrant. There's no parking sign right in front of that, you know? I mean, most of us in here know that you're not supposed to do that, but it still happens. We don't have the parking we need to because it was cut down. We can't have birthday parties and families come over, you know?
let's give someone else a chance to vent a
Okay.
little bit here. And I've got you on record as favoring a 2-hour parking limit. On both-
Something, we gotta come to a compromise.
Okay, all right, we'll see what else comes up.
Okay.
Thank you. Somebody else? Or,
Brandon Stoyles, 730 Whitney Street. It's been 17 years since this ordinance was put in place, and there's never been an issue down there. I've seen Almsville, Turner, Sublimity. We've had 4 different fire and rescue down there within the last year and never seen an issue. Our road's not congested right now, but if you eliminate all of our parking, it will be congested. And there's also part of yours says, in addition to local skinny streets designs, clustered parking bays adjacent to the street shall be installed. Where are we going to park? There's no parking anywhere. And I haven't seen an issue. I've been there for 14 years and not had an issue with any fire trucks, and I've never seen a ladder truck need to go in down there ever. We don't have skyscrapers. We have a couple 2-story houses. There's no issues.
not that it's important, but I asked the chief if I could borrow one of his trucks and drive through there to see if there were hazards, and he wouldn't do it. But he offered to take one down there himself and did, and so I appreciated that. But anyway, thank you. Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Carter. I live at 411 Whitney Street. I've lived there since 2004. First, I have a couple issues with the process. One is that this public meeting notice said that the documents for this would be issued 7 days prior to the meeting, and they were not, which is why I think most of these people hadn't seen these pictures and didn't read some of the documents that were provided. I got them from Dan because I happen to know Dan's email address. The second is that I don't think the process for putting in a proposal was adequately explained to the citizens either. Otherwise, this gentleman would have filed a proposal rather than thinking that coming down here was going to make a difference. I guess my third thing is, if you're not going to issue a draft order of approval, maybe don't issue this as your public documents, because it pretty much means anything we have to say here means nothing, because you've already got a draft order of denial. So, like I said, I've lived there for 14 years. I don't know what happened between 2000 and 2001 and 2014, except that we had no signs. Then we were told that the signs were put up because of a parking issue. People were complaining about parking. Now we're complaining that we have lack of parking, and now we're told that it's a public safety issue. So it wasn't a public safety issue that put up the signs. It was lack of parking. Or, I'm sorry, a parking complaint. Why on Greer, which is the street to the west of my house? First of all, the house directly to the west of my house was vacant for 8-10 years. So God knows who was complaining about a lack of parking on Greer Street. Then finally, I guess I'd like to say, if this truly is a public safety issue, just a brief review of the city. I found about 30 streets that are these skinny streets that don't have one-sided parking. So if that's the way it's going to go, I guess I'd like to see a timeline for when you're going to put up those signs. Thanks.
Okay, all right, thank you. Someone else? Lots of comments this evening from residents. Anyone else?
Sorry, in looking at this slide, I had one more thing to say. The fact that the fire department, and I believe Jack, he's a good friend of ours, I believe that this is a safety issue, except that the fact that the fire department had to use only their vehicles to stage this scene shows you that they couldn't find a spot on that street where they could use only one lane.
Time of day would have something to do with that, I think.
It would.
And so,
Or
yeah.
year, time of year.
Yeah, so that's a point. Someone else, anything? More questions from the council then?
Dan, procedure.
Go ahead.
Mr. Flashman, procedural question. When you gave us the order of denial, that is what you would suggest. That's a staff recommendation, right? That's standard operating procedure. That's not anything against you guys or a fly in the face. Isn't that, Dan?
That is correct. Every land use case, staff provides the decision makers with a draft order.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
So is this this isn't a situation where something that's been allowed to happen for a certain amount of years automatically gets grandfathered in because it was never enforced to begin with?
That is correct.
It's correct that it can't be grandfathered in?
Well, it's not a matter of grandfathering, because grandfathering refers to something that's in place, and then the city enacts an ordinance that makes that activity out of compliance with the ordinance. In this case, it was a condition of approval attached to the development of this subdivision that, quite frankly, the city was lax in enforcing.
Right, but when...
So it's not a change in the law.
But once you don't enforce something, I can tell you, I was involved in a lawsuit, and what I was told is it didn't matter what my rule said, because I did not enforce it for a period of time, I, being the city at that point, created it to be null and void, because I didn't enforce it. So I don't know why this would be any different, I guess.
I disagree. I think that people who were ticketed without being notified of a change in policy should be forgiven of that. But I live on a narrow street. And imagine there's something, I live at 308 East Water Street, right around the curve to the bridge. It's a very narrow street. And I imagine a fire vehicle would have a very difficult time making it around that curve if one vehicle were in the street, let alone two. And, you know, thankfully ladder trucks aren't necessary 99.99% of the time. But if one were necessary to put out a fire at the old red barn down there and they needed to get through, that's the point it needs to be done. I don't think that people should be penalized for a policy that changed and they weren't notified, but I think that street safety and access for fire and law enforcement personnel is something that's important, and perhaps we were lax, and we obviously were lax in signing. The people shouldn't be penalized for that who parked there, but we need to make sure that the fire engines and the ambulances and police vehicles can get through where they need to get through.
I think that's what these people are saying, is they have been able to get through, or when they need to get through.
But if you had a Ford F-350 out there, it's like parking downtown Corvallis, and Dan's from Corvallis and knows Corvallis. Corvallis has angle parking. If you park a Ford F-350 in front of the post office Corvallis, how many lanes do you take up besides your parking space? You're sticking out into a traffic lane, and that street becomes impassable. And that's what it would become quickly impassable with a large vehicle there for a fire rig. That's good. You hope you never have one, but when you need one, you want them to get there. That's what I'm saying.
But there's never been a time that it's wall-to-wall parking down both sides of that road.
I don't live there. I don't know.
Pull ahead 5 feet.
No, Mr. Mayor.
no. We can't, we're on questions from the council at this point.
Okay.
We have to follow the procedure.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
Keith, have you spoke to legal counsel about the liability on behalf of the city if, God forbid, we should have something happen down there? And if we either change this to allow the parking and somehow the city assumes liability for that action?
I haven't spoke to legal counsel, but I think to answer some of the questions here, it's a matter of when we become aware of an issue and how we address it. And I think anything beyond following the advice of a public safety issue, I would recommend at that point we would definitely need to talk to our attorney, because I do think that puts the city at risk and liability. Regardless of what happened in the past, we're aware of this issue now. We have indications and advice from public safety officials. This is a public safety issue, and that would be a real concern if we didn't follow that advice on the liability the city would then incur if something did happen.
So how about the other streets that are currently that way? What are we going to do with them?
I think we can look at other issues around the city and do a change. I know we're looking at other parking issues in other areas of the city right now in terms of sight lines and public safety. It has been a review that staff has been undertaking and will be coming forward with over the next few months to try to address other safety issues we're aware of throughout the community. And I know...
Well, because we just became aware of it tonight, which now, according to your words, makes us liable for every other city street that has the same situation.
We would need to look at other streets to see if there's the same risk and liability. Correct.
Well,
I think part of the issue, Mr. Mayor, is that this was dictated as far as the land use ruling back in 2001. That's how we got to where we're at today. That's why the streets were in that ruling. They made an agreement to have the no parking signs down there. So when you say it's the city causing the problem, it's not. It was the developer at the time.
Okay, well, the thing of it is they should have put them in there in the beginning.
That was condition of approval.
That was a...
He said the city wasn't, or didn't require the developer.
Mr. Mayor.
That was a...
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Guys?
Yeah, we're in a quasi-judicial hearing.
Yeah.
I don't like playing attorney, but I'm going to play one here. We need to follow the procedure of the public hearing.
Right. Yeah, we're past, I'm sorry, we're past questions from the audience. A staff summary, unless we've got other questions from the council. Dan, anything?
Staff has provided you with two options, with motions for each option. The first option, which is the recommendation from staff, is to retain the condition of approval for parking on only one side of the street, and for the city staff to post no parking signs on Weldon and Whitney Street east of North 3rd Avenue. The second option is to modify the condition of approval for parking on only one side of the street and request staff to modify it, the draft order to reflect that decision and bring it back to the council at your next meeting.
Okay. Hearing's closed. Council deliberation.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, please.
What if we looked at the possibility of making it alternative days on either side of the street? I mean, I don't know. That's something I thought about last time. I don't know if that would be, that would work, or... I
thought about that too. I thought maybe change the signs every 6 months. Or alternate days would be all right, but, you know, something that gives some relief to everyone. We can't go back and repave those streets wider. We don't address the public safety issue. We get a catastrophic fire down there. We lose lives. Where does the fickle finger of fate point? The city. You guys had restricted access down there and didn't enforce it. So, I don't know. Mr. Fusen suggested a couple 2-hour parking. That's one possibility. Alternative days, alternative weeks, alternate, what am I saying? Come on. Alternate weeks, days, months,
Mr. Mayor,
even numbered years,
Mr. Mayor,
odds, evens, yeah.
at the risk of incurring the wrath of some people in this town, I think that the safety of all people comes before the convenience of some people, and that the streets really aren't wide. And you're right, you've never had to put a ladder truck down there now, and we hope to God you never do. But in the unlikely event you have a compound fire like we did on July 4th in 2017, where right outside city limits, right behind the auto dealer, where we had to have Stayton and Almsville and Sublimity, and I don't know who else had to show up to put the fire out. There must have been 10 fire vehicles there. You know, if that were to happen, then, you know, and they couldn't get through, then it wouldn't be one house or two houses, it'd be several. And I think that the city is responsible for safety and for common sense, and, you know, and I'm sorry, but sometimes, you know, we need to do that. We need to, I'd say that, Mr. Mayor, I move that we, I think that denial of application or whatever is harsh in wording, but it's true. We need to, and somebody's holding up a petition, and I appreciate that.
So this is all, yeah, so all of these streets in the state better have these signs.
Mr.
The safety is an online
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead, you're on.
Okay, and I wouldn't say that that's the only place that applies to. I would agree that if we have a rule, it needs to apply equally. But right now, we're talking about this one neighborhood. I'm not saying it shouldn't apply to 308 East Water Street. You know, if it falls in the Gallywhack, it needs to apply there. But I move we approve this condition, and that the city be instructed to look at, and as time and money permits, apply the law.
No, you can't put time and money.
Sir.
What?
That as time and money permit, we sign those streets. I don't know what Lance's budget is for signs, what the time frame it takes to put up for signs, things like that. That's where we need to ask our, Lance, how long would it take to sign the 30 or 34 streets? Do you know? I mean, how long does it take to put up no parking signs on the street? Could your budget absorb that?
First of all, an actual inventory. I understand that they went out and did an inventory, but because someone drives down and measures a street does not necessarily mean that it's unimproved. If it's unimproved and we have more than 30 feet there, doesn't mean it can be no parking, okay? So we'd have to do an actual inventory, but once we have the actual inventory, you know, it's about $125 a sign. So, you know, depending on how many signs there is, you know, that's what we're looking at. And I haven't done it, so I really would rather not say how long it would take.
That's, you're the expert, that's fine. But
Okay. Other folks, other questions, other thoughts? Let's put our thinking caps on here.
Was that a motion?
that was a motion.
Okay, so I motion for item number 1, is that?
To order the, yes, motion for number 1.
I'd heard
With a
a long attempt at not incurring the wrath of the community.
I wanted to make sure that I was listening to people, and they understood that it wasn't just their neighborhood.
And somewhere
That
in
this has to do with
I mean, we got all these on
a large issue, but right now, the issue before us is one neighborhood.
Okay.
So I move that we accept the city staff recommendation number 1.
Okay. Is there a second? And I don't hear one, so the motion dies for lack of a second. So let's grind away on this, folks. Are we looking at some kind of modification of that parking on one side of the street only? Are we looking at that?
Are we allowed a question?
We're in a public hearing, Mr. Mayor.
Not the way this thing is structured. No, I'm
Unless
sorry.
the council reopens the hearing.
Close the hearing.
Mr. Mayor, do you want
Does
us
the
to
council
reopen?
want to do that?
Mr. Mayor, I move we reopen the hearing since the...
Okay.
I'll
Is there a
second that.
Is there a second? Okay, motion and a second to reopen the hearing. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign? All right, the hearing's open. Questions from the public?
I just wondered if you were to...
You are again, please?
I'm sorry, Jennifer Carter with
Jennifer, okay.
411 Whitney Street. If you were to go with Mr. Conquest's motion, would that leave room, and approve it, would that leave room for a later proposal? That proposal wouldn't be able to modify that decision, is that correct?
Yeah, the way things are.
Okay, so a later proposal could not come along and change it? Okay, that was my question, thank you.
Well, change happens, we know that, but I don't know how to respond to that.
We have reconsidered ordinances in the past, most recently the smoking ordinance.
Oh, yeah.
I'd just like to clarify, this is not an ordinance. This is not a legislative or policy-making procedure. This is a quasi-judicial hearing that, as I said at the beginning, is quite unusual because there was not an applicant. This was something that was brought to the City Council's attention back in September, and on October 1st, the council chose to schedule tonight's public hearing. Because it is a quasi-judicial decision, the testimony needs to be limited during the time the testimony is offered, and then the public hearing is closed. And someone could later, to address Ms. Carter's question, someone could later come back to the council, but it would require setting a hearing, notice like you did this time, so that's why on October 1st you made a decision to hold a hearing and it didn't take place for 6 weeks. So it could not be coming to the council going, gee, would you change your condition of approval, and having the council make a decision that evening. It needs to go through the procedures that tonight went through, of notice to the public hearing, limited time for people to provide testimony, and then a decision by the council.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Yes.
My name is Paige Hook, 2088 Quail Run Avenue. First off, I want to say that this is clearly a very frustrating issue, and I don't think it's only frustrating for the residents. I think it's frustrating for the council. It's also frustrating for the city, because this is one of those things that probably just shouldn't have even happened. And now it's cleanup time. Safety is super important, but we have, like, everyone has to come to some type of solution at the end of it, and you can't ignore safety. I don't have any answers really. I have a suggestion, which may be a good one, may be a bad one. It just is a suggestion. Possibly the idea of painting the curb area there, that's not really a curb, but like red, to where it's alternating on the sides where emergency vehicles could weave through if they needed to weave through, and it doesn't affect just one side of the street. I don't know what that would look like in maintenance, considering people can still park on it, and it would probably deteriorate the paint pretty fast, but we might have to just think outside of the box a little bit, because like 2-hour parking, I mean, you don't want to be giving people tickets for things like that. That's going to make people really upset. And you can't really, tell people they can only have a certain amount of cars on the street either. So, I mean, it's a multifaceted issue, but maybe we could slow down on the decision-making process. And this isn't going to be the only street that this is going to go for, and we're going to have to make decisions off of this for, it sounds like, multiple streets. So we might want to make sure that we're doing a slow process of it and not just jumping the gun. So that's it. Thanks.
I'd probably like to suggest that we wait 6 weeks and let some newly elected councilors dig around in this. I'll bet they'll have fun. If I were them, I'd probably hope that this thing gets resolved before they have to deal with it. Just a thought.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, please.
I had a question. So, Dan, on on the paperwork that we got about the order of denial, it says that the person who was originally going to develop that area was going to develop a mobile home park. So that the size of those streets would have been safe for a mobile home park, but not safe for housing?
They would not have been public streets. So the city would not have had any liability. They were going to be private streets. I have not seen the list of streets that supposedly are similar to these. My guess is that they include several other private streets in the city that were not built to city standards because they were going to be private streets and still are today.
Thank you.
And I think also the other issue in a mobile home park, and if you review the files from 2001, because it was built as a mobile home park, the water services were closer together. There were water services that needed to be abandoned, and so probably it was designed with driveways being closer together as a mobile home park, and there probably was not going to be as much space to park on the street without blocking someone's driveway. So there wouldn't be as much on-street parking in a mobile home park as you have on a street where you've got 70 or 80-foot wide lots.
We had council deliberation.
Well, before you go into deliberation, you've reopened the hearing, and so at some point you need to close the hearing again.
Okay, well, let's listen to some more suggestions. Aaron?
I just want you
Mr.
guys
Fusion?
to please take your time, and we're your public, you know? We're the ones that pays the taxes in this area. We are the people that live in that area. You know, take your time and think about this, please. I mean, I get the safety thing. I deal with safety all the time. I'm working on the roads in Portland all the time. I drive a dump truck and a trailer and everything down those streets. And some of you guys know from Portland, it's some pretty narrow stuff. I can maneuver it just fine. And fire trucks and stuff like that, they are trained, you know. They know how to get around some of those things. So please, it's a loop. You know, there's multiple ways of getting in and out of that. So please think about that.
Thank you. Just a question. Does anyone see an advantage in deferring action on this for any longer? I mean, is this one of those hot potatoes?
What is the
I think that's a grand idea, Mr. Mayor.
What is the city's legal liability, Keith? Is there a legal problem?
That's what I asked.
When we discussed this with Councilor Quigley's question, I think it is a liability issue for the city, and that's the big risk that we're taking. And I go back to my comments I made before. It doesn't matter when we discovered it; we're aware of it now, and that's the point where the liability really takes risk. So we can ask for a legal opinion. I think that's what the legal opinion is going to state.
Okay, that's one.
Mr. Mayor.
That's one immediate out. Go ahead.
Chief, how many citations have you issued in that neighborhood for parking violation?
That I don't know. I'd have to go back and run a list. I know that there have been some down there that have been issued. There's been a lot of warnings I know that were issued back in 2014 when it was when we put up the signs originally due to numerous traffic complaints down there. We sent code enforcement down there and had them give put warnings on vehicles at that time. I would like to make a clarification that at that time, the residents on Hobson were sent a letter on August 15th of 2014 when those signs were put in place.
When you bring that information back to us, can you tell us how many citations were issued also for parking on the sidewalk?
Got to look at that as well.
Do you think the nature of the design of the street encourages parking on the sidewalk?
Oh, definitely, because there's no curb to bump up to, so you don't really necessarily know. If you're not paying attention and know when you dip into that little bit of dip, you don't necessarily know that you're up on the...
Is there a law that says they can't park on the sidewalk?
Correct.
There? Yeah.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Sounds like Aaron has a plan to generate a different proposal. I still want to hear from legal counsel, so I'm willing to hold off until the next future date.
Is that a motion?
I'm just statement.
Make a motion and I'll second it.
No, hold on.
Just a
hold on.
statement.
We would need to close the hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. Hearing's closed. Council deliberation.
I'd like to make a motion that we put this off until we get some more information, both from the legal counsel, also giving the residents of that area time to maybe come up with some alternatives that they feel that they could live with before we make a decision.
I second it.
A motion and a second to defer action on this. Any discussion?
Close the hearing, right?
Yeah, closed hearing. No more. Alyssa, would you poll the council, please?
Sure. Counselor Usselman?
Yes.
Counselor Glidewell?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Cronquist?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. The council's decision may be appealed to the Oregon Land Use...
You didn't make a decision.
Yeah.
There's no decision.
Oh, so there's no decision. Well, we escaped that one. All right. Okay. I guess we're done with that. We're not done with it, but we're done for tonight. We'll work on this one. Neighborhood and us. Okay, no unfinished business. Housing Authority Committee appointments. Housing Advisory, what am I saying? Authority. That's in here someplace. Okay. Is that new Housing Advisory Committee?
There's our whole audience there.
Dan, is that in here as, and I read all this stuff too, consideration of ordinance 1027, that's different.
Yes.
That's different.
Different than what?
Well, different than this.
Downtown committee.
Anything.
That these appointment, yeah. Okay, no, we got to do that. The appointment thing is later. All right. Don't get ahead of ourselves. Mr. Fleischman, consideration of ordinance 1027 establishing a Housing and Neighborhood Vitality Advisory Commission. Go ahead.
Thank you. So you've got before you ordinance 1027, which if enacted would establish a Stayton Housing and Neighborhood Vitality Advisory Commission. Your current goals include a goal of neighborhood preservation. When staff brought to you back in August some suggested actions, issues to look at, the council selected at that time to establish such a commission and directed staff to prepare the ordinance that's in front of you. It actually was drafted quite a bit before that from a discussion that the mayor and I had at the time that there were some vacancies on the planning commission, and he was looking at a way of providing a role for some of the people who were not selected on the planning commission. But as presented to you, should you choose to establish such a commission, the commission would consist of 5 individuals, and the role would be to formulate and recommend policy to the Planning Commission and the City Council on housing affordability and neighborhood vitality issues, to recommend policies to the Planning Commission and City Council on ways to provide for and conserve very low, and moderate income housing within the city, to review and make recommendations regarding city applications for other funding sources for grants related to the housing purposes, to monitor or evaluate implement housing and neighborhood revitalization activities of the city. So staff recommends adoption of ordinance 1027 as presented, and I'll try to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Council deliberation on this one. We don't elect members to this body nor the planning commission from wards or specific neighborhood areas, specific physical areas. And we know of cities that do. Salem is one, and they get some interesting things out of that, and we never have seen the need to, but we've got neighborhoods unrepresented. And how do we get their voice? How do we hear their voice? Go out and knock on doors, or maybe have some small group that can speak for some of them. And so that's kind of where this is coming from.
So we're going to create neighborhood associations then?
Well, you could do that.
This has nothing to do with
Yeah, could do that. That's a more extensive process, though. Now you have voting and meetings and staff, council people assembling.
Neighborhood associations are I was president of several when I lived in Portland, when I was right out of college, and there's not that complex. I mean, Portland made it complex, but that's because it's Portland.
Okay.
You know, would we take this and put like every neighborhood and give one?
Am I missing something here?
We're trying to
because I don't think this says any. Is what the mayor says? Did this have anything to do with representatives from specific neighborhoods? That's not how I read it, I guess.
We don't.
Am I missing something?
Encouraging. Yeah, it's trying to encourage input from different neighborhoods.
The ordinance in front of you does not specify that appointments to the commission.
Okay. I thought maybe I missed something when I read it.
Will be from a diversified list of neighborhoods
Okay.
or anything, but I think that's part of...
I wanted to make sure I had not read it right.
I make up that was just part of the mayor's commentary.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, how many neighborhoods, if you will, do we have in Stayton? Ballpark?
Well,
no, what have we identified?
We have identified...
What, 8 or 9?
Neighborhoods, yes, 8 or 9 different neighborhoods, maybe 10 or 11 for purposes of sending out notifications through social media that need to be perhaps targeted to a neighborhood and not go out to everybody.
Would we want to not invite one person from those 10 or 11? And I mean, I admire Hank's inclusiveness, and I know that, I mean, a year ago at National Night Out, we were at a neighborhood that's never represented here at council meetings. We never see people from that community here because it is not, that community just doesn't come because I don't know if they're disinvited or whatnot, but would it be better to invite one person from every neighborhood and just start with, I mean, Hank, you had a good idea.
Well,
I mean, this could be the framework for neighborhood organizations, and rather than 5, have 8, and every neighborhood would then have a seat at the table, or 9, or whatever.
Well, something for future discussion, I think. It just...
Or we can modify that too.
Yeah, this is just in the thinking stage. Formulation.
Well, it's an ordinance.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, still thinking. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll offer a motion to approve the first consideration of ordinance 1027.
I second it.
Okay. A motion to first consider ordinance 1027, which is a consideration establishing a Housing and Neighborhood Vitality Advisory Commission. Okay, any other discussion? Alyssa, would you poll the group again, please?
Sure. Councillor Cronquist?
Aye.
Councillor Quigley?
Yes.
Councillor Mullen?
Yes.
Councillor Glidewell?
Yes.
Councillor Usselman?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, there aren't any staff commission reports tonight. Another time, presentation, comments from the public, anything? Yes? Tell us again who you are and where you live.
Paige Hook, 2088 Quail Run Avenue. First off, I want to thank you guys so much for passing this ordinance 1027. Very passionate about affordable housing, and I would like to encourage the city, when they are kind of developing this group, and if the council is involved in that, to look to cities like Milwaukee that are working on a really great affordable housing plan for their city. It's well structured, and they even have a forum coming up. I think it's at Clackamas Community College on December 6th. It's in the evening, and yeah, I'm just very excited for this commission, so thanks.
Okay, thank you. And anything else? Anyone else? Anyone else? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Wendy Stone, I live at 525 North Myrtle in Stayton. I'd just like to encourage the city, when they go to establish this commission, that maybe the word goes out through the water bills. I read those and I pay attention to it, and I know you've used that before, and I would hope it would be a good way to get people that might be interested in this.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Anyone else? Okay. Business from the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing this evening.
Okay. Business from the mayor, that's me. Downtown Ordinance Review Committee appointments. At the November 5th meeting, the council voted to establish a committee to review the Ordinance 1019. Council President Quigley and myself have conferred regarding the individuals to appoint to the committee. With the council's consent, I'd like to appoint the following. Committee Chair, Brian Quigley. Business owners, Charlene Vogel, Carrie Sessions, Terry Mesa, James Taylor. Property owners, Jerry Aboud, Greg Olson, and Shannon Turek. RDS representatives, Alan Meyer and Judy Mahoney. Business employees, Samantha Jones, and alternates, Wendy Stone and Penny Hall. And the council's presented with the following options: confirm the appointments as nominated by the mayor, or modify it. What would you folks like to do? This is a result of our...
Move we confirm?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion and a second.
Yeah.
Motion and a second to confirm. Any discussion? Okay. Let's go to a voice vote. All in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, declare that passed. And that committee, so those people they get notified, and you want to set the meeting dates?
Sure. I think it's going to be probably after December, I would think, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, it's tough pulling together
Yep.
meetings between Thanksgiving and New Year's.
How about the first meeting in January, we'll have a date set.
Okay.
Does that work?
Okay.
It's what, January 7th? Okay, yeah, that's enough time. People enjoy the holidays, and then we'll come up with a date.
Okay. Okay, and at that time, these particular situations that exist pursuant to Ordinance 1019 will be dug around. We'll dig into them, and you and that group can sort this out, or try to.
Yep.
Okay. Business from the council. Rotary Trail Work Project. Brian, you have...
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Over the last 2 weekends, I was asked by Chief to help with the Rotary Trail project they're working on currently. For those of you that don't know, it's a project that the Rotary took on because they saw a need for it, and they didn't think the city would be able to get to it soon enough or be able to finance it or whatnot. So with their help, they're making some real progress on having a trail, and Rich, you'll have to tell me where the street is again. Washington to Evergreen, or go ahead and...
It runs from Evergreen, the creek near Burnett, along the creek about 3/4 of a mile out to, and comes out on Washington on the other end.
it's going to be really cool. It's going to tie into the rest of the trails within the community. It's all going to be grassroots, funded with a lot of volunteer effort. Chief recruited me to go use the chopper, the tree chopper, and boy, that thing's amazing. Don't put your hand anywhere near that thing because
Oh,
you'll
not
be
like a
gone.
helicopter chopper?
No, not like the helicopter chopper, no. But we had 2 weekends where we, previously it was cut down, a lot of the brush was cut down along this potential future trail. And the 2 work parties so far have been going over there and to chip up, if you will, the tree debris and the brushes that were there. So there's a lot of piles of bark dust out there, and it's going to be really an interesting trail once it gets all tied in. Never been on that side of that property before. Haven't been on the cannery property, but it's going to be really enjoyable right along the canal. And to that, they're going to have future work parties, which they'd ask for some volunteers. So you can either reach out to myself or Chief or even the Rotary directly and let them know your interest, and they'll have some future dates announced. So it's going to be a collective effort, so I encourage everyone that's interested to come out and give it a shot. It's going to be a good time.
Good, thank you. Okay. Any other business from the council tonight?
I want to know if we're going to address the Mick and Mom's thing. I mean, it sounded, I mean, he's left now, but the owner has been here twice asking us to do something so he can get those people out of the front of his property, and I feel like we are kind of ignoring him, and I think that we need to, I guess I'm feeling like we need to be more responsive to him coming before us twice, asking us to do something. We need to either say we're not going to do anything or say what we are going to do and not put it off for a month or 2 when he's been here asking specifically for some kind of action.
Well, I guess we can say, I know it's too easy to just put it off for another month or 2, which is what that committee part of it will, what they will be dealing with. I suppose it isn't easy, but it's something to say we're not going to consider it. We're not going to consider your particular situation, which is a kind of a cruel thing to do, or just say, no, the idea has no merit. And again,
So what we're saying is go ahead and continue to smoke in front of your building, and I guess it'll be dealt with at a later date? I mean, is that what we're saying?
Counselor, the proposal, the meat and potatoes of that one is a public parking place behind Mick and Mom's in that public parking lot. You know, it sounds, well, it's just one parking space, and it probably isn't often used. But what happens when, and I said this last meeting or meeting before last, I said, what happens when my business, whatever it is, comes in and says, hey, city, I'm growing, I need a parking space, and it's over in that, near it's in that public parking area near the courthouse. Can you give me a space? And the city says, no.
Well, it's public. They don't need to give it to you, right?
Well, but see, now the trap closes. Tong. But you gave it to somebody else a few years or months or whatever ago.
Okay, I don't think they're asking to give it. I think that they're asking us to allow them to smoke on city property in that one area until this ordinance can go into effect. I don't think they're asking us to give them a city parking space.
Well,
but I could be wrong. But the problem being is I think that we should have at least given them a voice to be heard, and we didn't. And we, as a matter of fact, shut down again, showing up twice as city council asking to be heard, and didn't listen. And I just think that was unfair.
Mr. Mayor, I concur. We've been looking for out-of-the-box solutions. We seem to try to encourage that in your words and other people's words. I think it's an out-of-the-box solution. I was probably one of your better customers when you had a shop adjacent to that parking lot, and I can tell you there was never a time when I struggled to find a spot. There's always a space open for that. That whether you or I are both non-smokers and even anti-smokers, if you will, but there seem to be people on that block who smoke. There seem to be good businesses who are trying to get established, like the ballet studio and photo studio. And so if we can accommodate that portion of our citizens who smoke, move them off the sidewalk, give them an area that's unused, not giving them a parking space, but putting an area, putting a little shelter up, just like we approved last meeting, allowing the bus company to put a little shelter up on city land. Put a little shelter up there, it's not giving it to them, so that the people who own Trask, who all 3 or 5 of them smoke, the people from Homegrown smoke, the people from Wave smoke, and many of Mick and Mom's customers smoke. That block is probably going to have the highest incidence of lung cancer in this city, but you know, the facts are that they smoke there, and if we can do something to move them out of the front where they still are, in front of the ballet studio where she so eloquently spoke about how smoke gets people smoking get in the way of moms and kids wanting to go to ballet. I mean, that solves the problem at very little expense. It's not giving them a parking space. It's not creating a precedent. I don't think that we'll, you know, the bar going in where rumors in is a very high-end tap house. I don't think that's going to have a lot of smoking. I don't think that's the brewery going in is going to have a lot of smoking. It's one space, one time.
I was just wondering if, actually not even one space, one time, if we could do something to get them out of the front of that until this committee comes up with a thing. Being very clear that it's a temporary solution and that we have appointed a committee, and what they come up with is what will stand. But at this point, again, for the ballet school, for the other businesses down there that says that she's losing business constantly because of the smoking in front, I think that we need to do something right now for them.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh.
So this issue has been talked about privately. It's been discussed privately. I guess I'll have to go public now with my comments on this, which is the concerns I have is I think it sets a dangerous precedent, and I think it puts the city at risk and liability. The decision was not discussed with the city prior to the information becoming public. So I want to caution before we do anything like that I do think it sets a dangerous precedent and also puts the city at real risk and liability. It's just not as simple as giving away a public parking space. We've created a committee. The committee can fully vet this, and the decision can come from the council with a full set of information, not just public pressure. And that's my comment I'll make on this subject.
Keith, just for expounding quickly, what liability? I mean, are they going to sue us for lung cancer or what?
Mr. Mayor.
There's liability when we use public space for private enterprise. That's the liability we take and the risk that happens if something were to happen at that space. City takes on liability if we. It's the same thing with our parks. So there's a liability that comes from us letting them use public space for that sort of issue, and that would be something that I think would need to be fully looked at and vetted, and that's been why the city has privately opposed this solution and has encouraged for other solutions to be
So
done.
can we just agree not to enforce anything on that
Mr.
piece
Mayor.
of property?
Yeah. Councilor Quigley. Okay. Over here, please. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, so in regards to that issue on 1019, I was the one who was, you know, the proponent of having a greater voice in the whole situation. And part of that issue was that we never did our research on this, because now, the way it is, what do we do for 1019? We suspended enforcement of it. That's number one. So what's currently taking place today is taking place. The deeper issue when we start looking into this is the Oregon Indoor Clean Air Act, which currently today is being in violation of at several locations downtown, including Mick and Mom's. There's no two ways about it. You guys can look at it yourself and see how the statute reads. There's also an enforcement portion of the statute that you can read. So the way I see it now is we're trying to facilitate giving them some space to violate to get around state statute, and I'm not willing to do that right now. That's why we had the committee formed. We can discuss it during the committee and see how it comes out.
Yep.
Okay,
I agree.
that's true.
See, and I think that we have a downtown that has citizens who own businesses there, and we need to be as supportive as we can of those businesses. And I think that that kind of blanket statement that they are breaking the law, and I don't agree with that kind of. I guess I just don't agree with dealing with local taxpayers, voters, business people in that manner. When we ask them to get together, come up with a resolution, they do get together and come up with a resolution. And I would have appreciated if Mr. Campbell had been open in beginning, so I even knew there was a conversation that had happened.
Yeah,
but since I did not know that a conversation had happened, and I was not even aware of it, I felt like we were just totally ignoring these people.
But
that's not okay.
Had we not been in this position, had we not passed 1019?
Pardon?
Would we still be in this position had we not passed 1019 originally?
State law would have trumped.
Trump City.
Correct. That's my point. The reason why they're coming to us today asking to accommodate them is because of 1019. They're not saying anything about state law, the state statute currently on the books, but the state statute currently supersedes 1019.
Yeah.
All that suggestion, I think, was trying to make a reasonable accommodation for citizens. In that block, there tends to be a lot of smokers, and what can we do to get them out in front of the ballet studio?
Understand.
To follow state law.
Understand. To the mayor's point, how many other businesses will come to us saying, hey, we have this problem with state statute, how do we get around it? Oh, here's an idea. And that involves, hold on, and that involves giving up public property to accommodate a special interest group.
Well, I mean, the soccer club is a special interest group, and they're getting soccer field. I mean, it's not. That's a stretch, Brian. I understand the greater sense, but it's no more than putting up a bus shelter on city property for people who take the bus.
Is what state statute applies to that?
I'm saying that sort of accommodation in terms of using city property for a certain subgroup.
Not to get around state statute again. They're using it for shelter for the bus, not violation of state statute.
Could be that we could let them stand in the street, but I think there's a law against it.
That's one of the things I discussed as well. But we can get that as we get to the committee. I think the greater input is our committee now. There's 10 folks on there or so that have a vested interest from different angles. Let's see what they have to say.
Yeah.
We just keep kicking the can down the road, that's all.
And guess what? It could be that this committee decides we're going to keep it the way it is, like you guys passed, like you guys put together. And then that's it. At least they had a vested interest and participation in said ordinance.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else on that one? Future agenda item, December 3rd, 2018, November 6th, 2018 election certification. Is there anything else tonight?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
One thing, though, in regards to the safety of that neighborhood, and I don't want to make this comparison, but look what just happened in Paradise, California. I'd hate that to come to us in the form of some fire taking place down there along the swamp vicinity, and having that be able to come to that neighborhood or any other neighborhood for that section, and us being complicit and not doing all we could do to make sure those fire trucks get there. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. A friend at the coffee shop this morning said he'd been to Paradise. He said it was an old gold camp back in the 1850s. Not well laid out, narrow, curvy streets, houses built out in the woods, and almost an invitation to disaster when we get into these drought. California's in what, a 5 or 6 or 7 year drought period now. Thought it was, it's a tragedy anyway, but just...
So I have all kinds of family that live in Paradise, California. Many of them lost their homes, but I can tell you what one of the issues is that I think is really interesting when they're talking about clearing the land, is you tell any one of those people that own that property, that they have to cut down their trees, or they have to do something, and they're going to start yelling that it's their right to not do any of that on their property. And so when you have that much private property in that area, you're not going to be able to do anything.
It's my understanding that part of the issue with Paradise was that they changed direction of the roads and the streets. And they narrowed it down by putting parking spaces in there to narrow the width of the roads.
There's only one way in and out.
That's right.
That is a major, it was a major problem.
Are we done? Let's go home. It's 8:25.